there, Randy Green here. Let's continue with the advanced work on the emotional field. And we are now at page 5. I can't remember what I said earlier in the other videos, but I've shifted a little bit around on the illustrations and the text material, how it was built up, because as I'm moving forward in this, new information surfaces as well as deeper layers that I kind of hold inside, which I then unravel as I'm working my way through the material, and by that adding in more pages and more information. So please don't get confused if in the beginning of the videos I talked about we were working on this or that or whatever page, and now I'm using a different page setting. So we are on page 5, where I want to talk about the lower order energy system, because that's kind of where we are now, going into that again. And I know I worked with this already in the psychic energetic processes. And that explanation I used there was the beginning level of it. And here we are going into a more advanced level. So keep in mind that this is not contradictory information, but it is from information that unravels deeper layers of information. Similarly, as if you are doing general science and you're working with atoms, cells and molecular biology, you know that if you go deeper down, then what you see as a cell with different electrochemical processes then becomes an atom that is built up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And then you go even deeper into quarks and bosons and what have you, and then into the quantum field. Does the quantum field information then contradict the microbiology levels? No, not at all. These are two different angles of the same spectrum of energies that we have in our reality. Keep that in mind, because I know some of you are a little bit too linear still. And you will then say, well, Randy, you said that in the earlier video. Why are you saying this now? Because we are developing our knowledge about things. Similarly, as if you are taking just a little bit a higher level, so to speak, if you are working with your spleen, you will know that if you take it out of the body, it will look in a specific way. But if you dissect it, it will look into a different way. And you can then divide it deeper and deeper down into cellular structure, where you will then see there is a type of DNA code, etc., etc. So for those of you who have not really studied general sciences and understand this dynamic of going from the more macro scale of information into the micro scale of information, you need to do a little bit of self-study. So you see this is all over the place. Similarly, as if even if we go out in space, we can also do the same thing out there in the dark universe, where we look at galaxies and they can be divided into more and more subtle layers when we end up in stardust and different types of even the Planck length, which is as close as it gets to the speed of light, is again also an example of how things can change but are not contradicting each other. I'm just saying this because I know earlier on in some of my earlier classes, I had students that kind of said, well, this contradicts what you said earlier. Please don't go into that trap, because that is what we kind of distortion trap, where you want things to be in a specific way. So it contradicts what you have of information, but it doesn't contradict what I am saying, because I'm making a process out of this, which means the information is also relative to the context. And now we have reached that context where we're going to work with the lower order energy system and its processes from the context of this material and what you know now, and then digging a step deeper. And by that also going into more of what we call the deeper subtle layers, where we take what was before just called one layer. We are now beginning to divide that into more subtle layers. So this is again the spectrum. We're going from the outside to the inside. Keep that in mind, because that is the constant move we are doing when we work with information. We are working with the micro scale, and then we are going into the more and more subtle layers, where we will begin to be able to connect to the energetic levels of things. And that is where consciousness comes in. And this is where we differ from general science, because general science really don't believe that humans have the capacity to actively interact with energy, where I'm constantly telling you, yes, we can, because my entire life is a complete proof of it. And people that are getting into this work will say the exact same thing, including when we go back in time, people that were enlightened, enlightened, people that were doing spiritual teaching systems, gurus, etc., etc. Even we have scientific proof, or we could at least say perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't. But I actually do believe that earlier on in earlier times where humans were less rigid in their way of thinking, actually were able to manipulate their body energies to such an extent that they could levitate, because technically we're made out of empty space, so that should not be impossible. Okay, so we are now on page 5 in this video, and I might have had an earlier material, or in the earlier videos I had a different type of material on page 5, but I have moved it a little bit around because now that fits with what I want to explain here. So don't get too, what have you kind of confused. If I know you might in the earlier videos kind of been confused because the text material here is progressing as I'm making these videos. So that also kind of means that what was on the page 5 earlier on is now been moved further down because I want to put in some more explanation. So if you've been a little bit confused earlier in the videos, well, I'm sorry about that, but this is just how it goes. I can't undo and redo these videos because it's a process, as I said. Okay, so the lower order energy system is a composition of the mental and emotional field processes experienced via the inner sensations and thought processes transformed into constructions that define self, others, and reality. And we already covered these bases in the Psyche as Energy courses, where we work with this as the first step of understanding. But here we're now going to say, okay, even though these are what we call normal psychological processes, when we begin doing the energy work, and when we begin to really do the transformation work with the emotional field, we are to go beyond our sensations and thought processes. And we are to go beyond our definitions of who and what we are, what others are, and what reality is. And that is, again, when we are shifting our frame of reference into what we could call a higher order scientific level, where complexity thinking and the ability to combine new levels of information leads to some sort of innovation in our perception of what it actually means to have a self. So here we are on this excavation journey where we define ourselves in a complete new way, using the roadmap I am here creating for you. And this is how you're going to see it. It's a roadmap of energy. If you're doing the same kind of thing within general science, you would have the human form and you would then be seeing the anatomy of it. You would see the organs, you would see the peripheral nervous system, and all of this is out there. And you can look up on Wikipedia how your body looks, or just go to the free material where I talk a little bit about food and energy processes as well as exercise. And I'm going to make more advanced levels for this as well at some point once these deeper or more advanced levels of the emotional field and mental field processes are excavated, to put it that way, unraveled and put into context and put into a system, because then we will really begin to understand why the correct type of food matters, why the correct type of energy work with food matters, and why the exercise matters, and what it actually does to our cellular structure beyond what general science tells us. We know it has an enormous effect, both food and exercise, on the electrochemical processes of our body. So this is enormously important. And in my earlier material, I mentioned that if you go plant-based, that will also make you more sensitive. So that is part of it. So what we become what we consume, whether it's actual physical matter as in food, or it's energetic interference and interaction potentials as we are also having. And this is where when we go from the outer layers and inside in the emotional field, in this one we're not talking about the mental field, that will be for a course in itself, as I mentioned before. So here our focus will be the solar plexus access point, which you see on the illustration on page 5, and the emotional field processes. And I keep saying this is mainly Pleiadian technology, but that is before it was completely altered, and that technology is technically the distorted, completely re-engineered type of technology that were taken from the 2-8 pillar technologies, which the Pleiadians were part of. They were part of engineering the original physical vessels for the humans inside our system, having this type of specific genetic ability to link up to technology within what we call the density 1 fields. But that is something I'm not going to go further into here because I already touched ground with it in earlier material. And in this work, it's not that important. It's just kind of that you understand that, well, that kind of goes a little bit across the sector of avian into mammal kind of technologies, where if you go with the mental field processes, it goes more from insectoid and into raptoid type of technologies, just so you kind of have that division with you as well when we work with these things. But it's not that important, so to speak, right now, because here we have a different focal point. We are focusing on what you are going to do in your energy work. And you have done the basic energy work videos, and these are still valid. This information you're getting here is again a step deeper into the processes and the techniques you already learned in the basic energy work videos. So this is where you take what you have learned in the basic energy work videos, where we talked about the peripheral nervous system, we talked about glands, we talked about the bodies, we talked about the hands-on. That is kind of what you say when you put hands on. You're working closer to the body when you actually at the physical level, which are the electrochemical processes. And then deeper into the nervous system sensations, which is what I've depicted here on the illustration. Number 4 is the electrochemical processes. Number 3 is the nervous system sensations or peripheral nervous system. And then number 2 is the subtle energy processes, which is information field system. And that's the LPF2. And then the code layer, which are lower sequences, reality fields, and that can both be LPF2 and LPF3. But the reason why I'm doing 4, 3, 2, 1 is because we're going from outside and in. And in the basic energy work videos, you've got this whole working from the outside and the central nervous system that we're kind of merging in with the peripheral nervous system. That is the central nervous system is the core of the cells. The peripheral nervous system is the outer levels of the cell. And then we go into the 2 subtle energy processes. And that is where we're working in this information stream that I'm giving you here, because there we have got into what we could call the astral field, or the astral energies, or the more subtle energy processes that are connected to the physical levels, which are step 1, the electrochemical processes, and then the nervous system sensations, which are also a type of subtle energy, but it's measurable. This is something machines can measure. But when we go into the subtle energy processes, that is beyond machines. That is our personal conceptualization of the energy fields. And this is where we're going to work, again, taking level 2 and divide it into actually 8 sublayers. I put below on the next page, page 6, I put these different layers into 9 layers, and I'll explain why I'm saying here 8, but actually they're listed up as 9 layers, which I will come back to why I'm doing that. So the lower energy system can be worked with via the 3 access points from which we access different processes. I've gone through this before, and here we're doing the solar plexus access point number 3, and it gives access to the sensation mechanism of our psyche, and it is the process units of emotional and mental field kinetic processes. But it is also, if you do the double hand position, and if you have cleared out doing the basic energy work, pulling out distortion layer energies and get to the point where you kind of feel that your peripheral nervous system has this beautiful golden energy to it, when you put your double hand position on the solar plexus area, activate that one, and then you're just kind of excavating through the layers. Number 4, the physical processes. Number 2, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system kind of feels that actually goes with that. These 2 can be accessed via, just to put that one, via acupuncture, via the meridians. That is that energetic intersection point that you can use in Chinese medicine. But you do the double hand position here. If you can't sense anything, you clear it out with your hands. You pull out whatever is there, what's in the way. Can also be kind of food processes, residual energies, crystallization energies, what have you. You need to work on that area to get access to the emotional field on its more subtle layer. So that takes time. including training, and the ability to be able to see what you're actually working with. In the beginning, just sense what is going on there. And sense is kind of where you have the physical sensation. And when you begin to go into the more subtle sensations, it becomes perception, which eventually, as your brain develops and trains into the ability to decode this sensation information, code streams will begin to provide imageries to you as you develop these mechanisms, because this is a completely new way of learning to work with your body. It's not done within 1 year. It takes time. It takes enormous amount of energy work, and the constant processing through the basic energy work videos. I cannot stress this enough. I know many of you are simply not disciplined enough in your energy work. You don't really understand how much it actually takes. You think it's easy peasy, but it's not. It's quite complicated. There's a completely new way of really activating your entire body mechanism and its sensation mechanisms and interpretation mechanisms and dynamic process mechanisms that will have to be developed in this inner work, which is why, in a way, many people have not completed this. But those of us who have this understanding that whether or not, however and whatever our future will be, for me, there is absolutely no question whether or not we should do this, because we have to return to our original, as much as we can, our original type of physicality and perception field and understanding of reality, so that the cognitive processes we have are in alignment with this enormously advanced perception of ourself and reality and our body and what's going on there, because these becomes enormously important tools in whatever's going to happen in our world. I have a slight idea of what's going to happen, but I don't really know yet. This is with the whole being looking into the future. You don't really know, because that alters according to humans and what humans are doing. But either way, it's a preparation for whatever is coming in this life, in the afterlife, or what have you. So it doesn't matter for me. This is how we do. That's what we're going to do. This is who we were. And of course, we're doing it. There's absolutely no question about it. So that kind of goes without saying for me. But consequently, when we work with the emotional field, we work with its energetic levels, the constructed energy patterns, and the material these are made of. I talk about that in the basic energy work videos as well. And in the basic whole psychology, or the basic whole ideas, this is what we were focused on, that more what we call lesser subtle layer, but where we began understanding the broader context of this. And here we're then diving into the more micro scale of the exact same information. We are now excavating, unraveling it, going deeper. Okay, so as I just mentioned above, below are again the 4 layers, which I have here put a little bit into more detail than the illustration above. Number 4 is the outer bioenergetic processes, which can also be called electrochemical processes. They are bioenergetic processes, also electrochemical processes that are generated by the organs, the glands, and the cells. And that number 4, if you go on page 6, is kind of what I explained in number 1, the bioenergetic processes, which are unconscious electrochemical processes in organs, glands, and cells, which means you're not really onto this whole, oh yes, this is what's going on. I'm sensing that after you've eaten, you're not seeing or sensing how the different forms of glands are working to decompose what you have eaten. You're not seeing that what your spleen is doing and all these kind of things. These are processes that are kind of out of your conscious scope of perception. At some point, you can actually begin to detect these, but that comes further down the line, really further down the line, when you have cleared the other fields enough of distortion, then you will actually begin to see some of these processes and what's actually going on. And then number 3, the nervous system sensations, which are also subtle electrochemical, but they are what we could call not that subtle. And then number 2, the even more subtle psychic energetic information levels, of which there are 9. And that is in the next page. And technically, you can say there are 8. And I put this kind of in a little bit of brackets, because the number 1 is the electrochemical processes, the outer layer. So technically, when we go into the subtle energetic information, there are 8, And that goes with the 2-8 pillar. So number 2 is the emotional field. That's number 2 in the 2-8 pillar. And then it goes up to the 8th dimension, which are the 8 levels of the subtle psychic energetic information levels or field that holds these 8 levels within it, so that the code layers in the low order sequences are connected and can connect to the same levels in the reality field we're part of. And this is just kind of where the Pleiadian technology and the Pleiadian programs come in that are linked up to nature. So again, that goes with the plant kingdom, as you know, from the LSA Bale material, is connected to the astral plane as well. This is the connection we have there. So via the sciences behind the different levels and energies of the emotional field, the work gets more advanced, but also in some sense clearer. This is a roadmap, so that is as clear as it gets. The levels are to be worked with and transformed through the opposition dynamics of the inner-outer interactive potentials. And these are all the things I've explained in the prior videos, the psychic energetic processes and the psyche as energy, the psyche as processes, and keeping the psychic energetic balance in the beginning of this course as well. So we are now on page 6. So there I made a new illustration, and this is I've made it in similar versions, but here I have tailored it in a way that is more in alignment with how I see things today. When I began doing this work in my early material, in the Souls of Humanity, Tarology book, etc., and the early course material, I saw them more as concentric cycles. And I do depict that often when we do the simplistic version of it, but when we do go into the astral plane itself, or the emotional field, or the subtle emotional layers of the emotional field, then it is more accurate to actually have these type of circles that are higher above and below, but not as broadly out in what we could call the middle layer of it. It's not this has this huge bulk on the side. It's actually more vertical oriented because we are upright in whatever position we are having. So this is more accurate. So the even more subtle psychic energetic information layers, which is number 2 in the original 4 different field layers that goes from the outer organic and into the more subtle ones, ending up in the code layer, as we saw on the previous page, holds energies connected to the LPF2 technologies and distortion energies inserted after the hijacking. They were literally taking over the Pleiadian technologies, the Pleiadian programs, and re-engineered these. These are part of the LPF2 regressed and depleted racial grids, which are connected beneath our feet, which are part of the planetary setup, as I already explained in the previous videos. And this transformation, what we're here doing, can be divided into 9 levels. So level 1 is technically the same, as I already explained, as level 4 on page the previous page, the bioenergetic processes, all the unconscious electrochemical processes in organs, glands, and cells. And the reason why I'm taking that in is because this is actually the layer that will show the outer effect of the other 8 layers. So if something happens in layer 9 on the LPF2 network attached to the artificial 4th dimension programs, which are mainly semi-android races such as the Greys, if they are tampering with our reality program on that level, then that will bleed through and ripple out as a ring effect into our physical level, that is the outer reality. So what you need to understand here is that on the previous page, we kind of had 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm deliberately putting it in that direction because that's where you go out and in. So when you do the double hand position on your solar plexus and clean the outer layers and go into the subtle layers, and you get to layer number 2, which is the astral field or the emotional field on its enormously subtle layers. And then on that deep going in, and as you go in, you then expand out. And these are the subtle fields I have depicted on this page. So you go 3 steps in, and then you go 8 steps out as a field around you, but you have to go in to get that outward movement. So when I show these fields around you, these are not fields that are detectable from a bioenergetic level as a normal human sensations and normal human conscious processes, but they come with you also altering your brainwave patterns. And this is where you need to go into that kind of theta state where you are in between. You're getting very close to that. It's the same state as used in regression. You are conscious, but you are enormously relaxed. Your whole body is just calming down, and you're seeing things as it surfaces from the body itself, from these subtle layers. You get connected to this. And again, remember, this takes enormous amount of training. You have to transform a lot of energies to be able to work with this clearly. But this is also where I kind of have explained to you, when you put your hands on, you are on the bioenergetic level. When you can then actually follow your hands once you have shift the modality of the mental processes and your perception level by the double hand position, then you can try and put your hands out a little bit outside the body, just 5 centimeters above your body, 10 centimeters above your body, outside of your body, and then 15 and 20 and 25 and 30, and kind of as far as you can say, this is why I made it in this kind of not completely round circles, because you could say at the midpoint, it expands to the tip of your fingers. That is a layer 9 that you can feel out there with your hands. And as you learn to become more sensitive in your hands and let your hands detect field information and transform it from your hands and your sensation in your hands using peripheral nervous system, which you have cleared at this point, then it can detect the information from the tip of your fingers and then literally take it back into the center point of your hands, and then go into the underarms and the elbows and into the arms and into the shoulders. And they are depicted and connected to different levels of these concentric circles as well. And there, see how this different information kind of follows these rings. So at the tip of your fingers, you can detect the 9th layer. When you go a little bit further in, contracting your arms a little bit, you can see the 8, and you pull your arms further in, you have the 7, you pull your arms further in, you have the 6, and onward and so forth. And if you work on your shoulder level, of course, you will then have that higher level of the concentric circle, which goes with circle number 3, that also goes into the brain. So that is kind of, that layer actually goes to the throat, and that's part of the mental processes. Number 2 goes to the heart field and the thymus, which are also connected further down, actually going into, it goes a little bit below, and I should actually more accurately say, well, it's not where the cycles end, that is connection point, but the whole area it covers. So let us take this illustration and go kind of step by step. But what you need to do is you read the 9 levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And these are the same numbers that goes from number 1 in the whole intestinal area, which is that circle that covers all of it. It actually goes a little bit further out, but this will do. That covers the whole intestinal processes, the glands, whatever's going on in that area, in the thorax area, going from your genitals and up to the whole stomach area, and all of your intestines and everything that's in that area is covered with the bioenergetic processes, which you can also what you can call work with energetically by putting your hands on and clear them out. But this is mainly where you alter the processes here by changing your food, changing how you think, and changing how you feel. That affects that area. You know, if you get upset, that affects your stomach area as well. And if you get stressed, you have to go to the loo and release yourself of different forms. If you're going to fight and flight, you have to do the same thing. This is where the peripheral nervous system goes into the sympathetic or the parasympathetic processes that are connected to your brain processes, and by that put in different types of enzymes that allows your body to work in an optimal way. So that is level number 1. And the access point is the solar plexus. You can also put your hands on the other levels of your stomach and you will get information there eventually, but these will be more connected to organs. But if you do the solar plexus, you are right there connected to the peripheral nervous system. because that is what the solar plexus is. There's an enormous amount of nerves that are connected around your solar plexus. This is why it hurts like hell if you get kicked in the stomach. And that sensation is connected to the limbic system of your brain and the lower electrochemical processes of the brain, which is why we know that what you eat also affects your mood. It affects how the brain works. It affects the level of residual distortion energies that are created in your brain structure. So the more contaminated, processed and low energy your food is, the more you will slow down your electrochemical processes. They will run in the lower scale, more within the infrared spectrum, which are what we call the subtle layer energies of our planetary field, connect to that level of the magnetic field, and by that connected to specific type of low level types of energies. Whereas if you have more high processed, in energy wise processed as in transformed food, where you have activated the higher order energies in what you eat doing the energy work with food, you will then absorb and process higher degree, a higher type of energies that will then activate your solar plexus and your whole intestinal area and your peripheral nervous system on a high vibrational level, which will then allow you to process information on that higher level. And that is why I keep referring to that you have to do energy work with your food as well, so that it get as high vibrant as possible, and eat that type of food that is in alignment with your biochemistry, because some of you are more plant-based, or depending on your type of genetics, if you have a higher mammal level of mammal genetics, for instance, whereas others with a little bit of more insect or avian are more fruitarian kind of oriented, and these differences will play in. But there is also this depending on how your brain is working, because we know the brain works on high levels of glucose, and that comes from fruit, which will then allow the brain to process information again on a more subtle layer. So the food has an enormous impact on these different energetic layers, because it alters the biochemistry of our physical form. And that's the whole intestinal area. So that's a huge play that is being influenced by 8 other layers of information system that are connected to different reality fields. Again, connected to the more primitive layers of your brain. The instinctual layer is connected to the biofield. The limbic system and the midbrain is connected to the processes in the emotional field, and the cerebrum and the higher order processes in the frontal lobes are connected to the mental field and the core levels of our existence. So don't be confused with this whole, when I say that the biofield is connected to what we could call sorry, I just got a little bit confused there. Anyways, we'll just leave that. That's the etheric field. That is the code layers that goes with the planetary code layers. And I know I made a little bit of, there was a glitch there in my brain. Sorry about that. Let's go back to the 9 layers with this. So again, remember, when you work with your body, you work with mental field, emotional field, and biofield, again on different levels. Here we work with emotional field. We have worked through the whole intestinal area that are connected to the second layer, which then begin technically with your thymus and go with that whole concentric circle down and affect your genitals as well. And this is one of the reasons why when we talk about guru teachings and Hindu teaching systems, why they stopped having these sexual activities to lift up their energies and not wear them off. They always said that not spilling the semen, this is for males, of course, females were not allowed to do this type of guru teaching systems. That's only for males in India. So they would not waste their semen and the vital force energies to the ground, which means that pulling the energies down, but we're trying to lift them up to get better health. They said that if they wasted this, they got opened up for ailments and different forms of possessions and different forms of diseases. So that kind of goes with that understanding that your immune system, which interestingly enough goes with both the lymphatic system, but also the thymus. The thymus glands are in a way atrophying the older you get. And I do believe to a strong degree that the gurus were not completely far off. There is absolutely a connection there, and that is why I depicted with that concentric cycle that also connects to the subconscious level, fantasies and dreams. So, which you say that your health system is connected to sexual activity, you can then figure out that the more distorted your sexual activities are, the lesser type of energies that you are actually processing, the more distorted they are, the heavier they are, the more they're connected to underworld, shitty things, to put it, the more perversion that are involved with that. That will, of course, affect your whole health constitution. And that's why people that are quite perverted in their ways have a specific, they develop, their body eventually becomes this, it expresses the kind of energy that is actually processing when we talk about sexual activity. As you learn to lift your energies above, you see they put a horizontal line that is kind of dividing above present day reality energies, and below is kind of older reality grid energies, quote unquote, the underworld energies. You will see everything below the thorax and the solar plexus is kind of older reality grid energies. These are subconscious, these are unconscious processes in the body. And the further down you go with your legs downwards and into the concentric circles as they are below that horizontal line. There is the vertical line as well. That's the 1, 2, 3 up and 9 to 9, 1 to 9 levels. That is the inner on the higher levels energies that kind of goes from present day reality into the higher worlds, and the which is also present day, whatever's going on the different levels of reality out there in the other realities, in the other dimensions. But below we go back in the past. This is all about what used to be on our planet. These are the different sedimental layers of our planetary construction, which are already worked through. And that technically begins with the sexual energies. The sexual energies are connected to subconscious processes, and you will discover at some point as you really begin to work with these subtle layers, and the number 2 layer of your energies with your thymus, double hand position on your thymus, and you begin to clear that one out, there will be this arousal of sexual activity that will begin to draw in earlier levels of our reality that are connected to the whole health processes, that are connected to life force energies and the correct use of life force energies, which we know in sexual activity is the wrongful use of life force energy, because life force energy is not made to procreate. It's not made to be wasted off, which we're seeing in animals all over the globe that are only having short periods of time when they're in heat. They're not constantly embarking on sexual activity as humans are, but that's because our sexual activities are connected to underworld energies, it's connected to prior lifetimes, it's connected to subconscious processes, and is connected to what we call different forms of programmings that are controlling the human emotional field, constantly keeping it low energetic. So that is what the sexual activities are for. They are made there to ensure that your whole emotional field is drawn to a lower sequence and keeping it in number 2, 1, 2, 3 processes, these 3 rings keeping you stuck there so you won't go beyond. So the subconscious is part of the dreams and your fantasies and what comes in out of nowhere. This is all the things that Carl Gustav Jung have worked with, the subconscious level, and we have worked with that in dream therapy, and we work with it in visualization and creative imagination, and all of this level is part of that one. And then number 3 is the collective consciousness field, which is full of archetypes and entities. And I'm here again referring to Carl Gustav Jung and his ideas, Jungian psychology. You can look a little bit up there. Perhaps not directly read Carl Gustav Jung because he's a complicated dude to read, but the ones that have worked with it in the 70s and 80s and 90s, the psychologists that work with that and the interpretation of what they have worked with practically within our, what we could say, more modern Western world interpretation of his ideas, because they're absolutely valid on this level. The collective consciousness fields also goes in with the interjected type of sciences, which goes general science and general psychology, what you learn in school, and all of these kind of things. That's part of the outer layer of the collective consciousness field, which is why it connects to the brain. But it goes deeper from that level. It goes deeper into the archetypes and entities that are part of controlling what we could say the lower levels of the brain structure. That is highly connected to the emotional processes as well. That's why what you think will affect how you feel. That's that level, that's that third concentric circle that there goes in and connect your thinking processes. Again, if you follow the ring around, you will see it goes below the genitals, actually goes to your thighs. And that level is beginning to connect to what we could call earlier levels of our civilization. On that level, you can actually almost put your hands on there, but I will not recommend it because you're not ready for that information in the old racial grids and old reality fields that used to be part of who and what we are. This is more primitive levels of the human civilizations. You will probably at that level actually connect to a large degree Neanderthals and the earlier, the last stages of what humans at that point regressed into the mammal type of information on our reality. And that is also why a lot of females have a tendency to grow fat there, because it's part of the reproduction energies that are and were integrated into the human race going back in time. Again, remember, even though it's 15,000 years ago, the regressed races traveled back in time and altered the original regressed mammal humans into being able to give birth to own offspring. And that explains, remember earlier in an earlier video, I said, I don't really know if the Neanderthals were able to produce offspring. Yes, it was seeded into these so that over the course of evolution, it became possible in our type of physical form to do the same thing. Because as you remember from the whole philosophy book, when you are to do genetic modification, it has to go over several generations before the cellular structure adapts to the inserted information, which goes from level 9 and ripple into what we call the outer bioenergetic processes. So this is along going back in time and figuring out how much are these feedback systems going to influence the reality fields before they connect to the collective consciousness fields, the archetypes and the entities of the physical form, and then begin to go into affecting the molecular structure via fantasies and dream technologies. I say dream, but it's actually dream technology that is connected there, affecting the processes of the physical form before it begins to ripple into recreating the RNA and recreating the DNA structure of the organs, glands, and cells, and in that the electrochemical processes of the body. So that is kind of where you have that level. And then from that, when we are beyond the collective consciousness field, which is already investigated in the 70s and 80s by Jungian psychologists, it was investigated with LSD, it was investigated with holotropic breathing type of techniques, it was investigated in, and still are, by people that are using DMT, mushrooms, LSD, what have you, cannabis. All of these levels are part of these first three layers that are easy accessible because they are connected to our body functions. So in that, when people are doing either near-death experiences or they breach through into the collective field in using a different kind of drugs and supplements, what have you, or breathing exercise or use by sound or doing the Om and breathing in a specific way, what have you, that is the three layers they're working their way through. And that is all of their own crap, to put it that way. That's their own distortion energies, and whatever they hold in the first two layers will determine what they will meet on the collective consciousness field layer. It will determine what kind of archetypes they're seeing. It will determine what kind of entities, astral, lower astral entities that are breaching in and are part of our emotional field. And I explain all of these part of their both holographic, energetic, but they are using our energies to create a visual representation. These entities they are mainly genetic residuals. They can be past life entities. They can be what is left of original energetic parasites and original technologies, but now scattered and demolished into little bits and pieces. They can be part of the inserted regress genetics, tampering with our lower fields. There can be a lot of stuff, and they are all connected to the main distortion fields of our planet that are constantly being created by humans, including computer programs, including what we're seeing in movies, including what we have created over the course of history. So on this level, you can encounter gnomes and Santa Claus and what have you, whatever these energies are that has been created out of the collective consciousness field that are connected to human emotionality. And if you have the same vibration, if you have the same energetic structure, if you have the same kind of ideas from this life or previous lives, this is what you will connect to in the first 3 layers of your work as you unravel the content. And these are an enormous amount of distortion that needs to be cleared up before you even get any further. So to begin with, what we're working with is our own distortion layers, which is determined by the emotional field. So this is just so you kind of understand that takes an enormous time in meditation, in contemplation, and the discernment of what you're actually working your way through. So in this video 4, I will end with that level, and then we will continue in the next video. Thank you.